Come on around the side.
I'll go the hard way like you did.
Yeah, I can still see because
Child's Christmas in Wales by Dylan Thomas. One Christmas was so much like the other in those days around the sea town corner now, out of all sound except the distant speaking voices I sometimes hear a moment before sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6. All the Christmases roll down toward the two-tongued sea like a cold and headlong moon bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stop at the rim of the ice-edged fish-freezing waves, and I plunge in my hands in the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white bell-tongued ball of holidays resting at the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out come Mrs. Prothero and the firemen. It was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden waiting for cats with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December in my memory is white as Lapland, although there were no reindeers. But there were cats. Patient, cold, and callous, our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars, and horrible-whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would side and sidle over the white back garden walls, and the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur-capped and moccasin trappers from Hudson Bay off Mumbles Road, would hurl our deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes. The wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen in the muffling silence of the eternal snows, eternal ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden. Or if we heard it at all, it was to us like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But soon the voice grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Prothero, and she beat the dinner gong. And we ran down the garden with our snowballs in our arms toward the house, and smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombulating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like a town crier in Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in Wales standing on the wall in a row. We bounded into the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped at the open door of the smoke-filled room. Something was burning, all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero, who always slept there after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But he was standing in the middle of the room, saying, "A fine Christmas," and smacking at the smoke with a slipper. "Call the fire brigade," cried Mrs. Prothero as she beat the gong. "They won't be here," said Mr. Prothero. "It's Christmas." There was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, and Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them waving his slipper as though he were conducting. "Do something," he said. And we threw all our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero, and ran out of the house to the telephone box. "Let's call the police as well," Jim said. "And the ambulance. And Ernie Jenkins, he likes fires." But we only called the fire brigade. And soon the fire engine came, and 3 tall men in helmets brought a hose into the house, and Mr. Prothero got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the firemen turned off the hose, and were standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them. She said the right thing always. She looked at the 3 tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Would you like anything to read?" Years and years ago, when I was a boy, when there were wolves in Wales and birds the colour of red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills, when we sang and wallowed all night and day in caves that smelt like Sunday afternoons in damp front farmhouse parlours, when we chased with the jawbones of deacons the English and the bears, before the motor car, before the wheel, before the Duchess-faced horse, when we rode the daft and happy hills bareback, it snowed and it snowed and it snowed. But here a small boy says, "It snowed last year too. I made a snowman and my brother knocked it down and I knocked my brother down and then we had tea." But that was not the same snow, I'd say. Our snow was not only shaken from whitewash buckets down the sky, it came shawling out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. Snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses like a pure and grandfather moss, minutely ivied the walls, and settled on the postman, opening the gate like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white, torn Christmas cards. Were there postmen then, too? With sprinkling eyes and wind-cherried noses, on spread frozen feet they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully. But all that the children could hear was a ringing of bells. "You mean that the postman went rat-a-tat-tat and the doors rang?" "I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside them. I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells. There were church bells, too. Inside them? No, no, no. In the back black snow-white belfries, tugged by bishops and storks, and they ran their tidings over the bandaged town, over the frozen foam of the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. It seemed that all the churches boomed for joy under my window, and the weathercock crew for Christmas on our fence. Get back to the postmen. They were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking and dogs and Christmas and the snow. They knocked on the doors with blue knuckles. Ours has got a black knocker. And then they stood on the white welcome mat in the little drifted porches and huffed and puffed, making ghosts with their breath, and jogged from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out. And then the presents? And then the presents. After the Christmas box, and the cold postman with a rose on his button nose tingled down the tea tray slithered run of the chilly glinting hill. He went in his ice-bound boots like a man on fishmonger's slabs. He wagged his bag like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned the corner on one foot, and by God he was gone. Get back to the presents. There were the useful presents, engulfing mufflers of the old coach days, and mittens made for giant sloths, zebra scarfs of a substance like silky gum that could be tug-of-war down to the galoshes, blinding tam-o'-shanters like patchwork tea cozies, and bunny-suited busbies and balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking strides. From aunts who always wore wool next to the skin, there were mustached and rasping vests that made you wonder why the aunts had any skin left at all. And once I had a little crocheted nose bag from an aunt, alas, no longer whinnying with us. And pictureless books in which small boys, though warned with quotations not to, would skate on Farmer Giles' pond and did and drowned. And books that told me everything about the wasp, except why. Go on to the useless presents. Bags of moist and many-colored jelly babies, and a folded flag, and a fake nose, and a tram conductor's cap, and a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell. Never a catapult. Once, by a mistake that no one could explain, a little hatchet. and a celluloid duck that made, when you pressed it, a most unduck-like sound, a mewing moo that an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow, and a painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sea, and the animals any color I please. And still, the dazzling sky blue sheep are grazing in the red field under the rainbow billed and pea-green birds. Hard-boiled, toffee, fudge, and all sorts, crunches, cracknel, humbugs, glaciers, marzipan, and butterwelsh for the Welsh. And troops of bright tin soldiers who, if they could not fight, could always run. And snakes and ladders and happy ladders, and easy hobby games for little engineers, complete with instructions. Oh, easy for Leonardo. And a whistle to make the dogs bark, to wake up the old man next door, to make him beat on the wall with his stick, to shake our picture off the wall. And a packet of cigarettes. You put one in your mouth and you stood at the corner of the street and you waited for hours in vain for an old lady to scold you for smoking a cigarette, and then with a smirk you ate it. And then it was breakfast under the balloon. Were there uncles like in our house? There are always uncles at Christmas, the same uncles. And on Christmas mornings, with dog-disturbing whistle and sugar fags, I would scour the swathed town for the news of the little world, and find always a dead bird by the post office, or the white deserted swings. Perhaps a robin, all but one of his fires out. Men and women wading, scooping back from chapel with tap-boom noses and wind-bust cheeks, all albinos, huddled their stiff black jarring feathers against the irreligious snow. Mistletoe hung from the gas brackets in all the front parlors. There was sherry and walnuts and bottled beer and crackers by the dessert spoons. And cats in their furabouts watched the fires, and the high-heaped fire spat, all ready for the chestnuts and mulling pokers. Some few large men sat in the front parlors without their collars, uncles almost certainly, trying their new cigars, holding them out judiciously at arm's length, returning them to their mouths, coughing, then holding them out again, as though waiting for the explosion. And some few small aunts, not wanted in the kitchen, or anywhere else for that matter, sat on the very edges of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break, like faded cups and saucers. Not many those mornings trod the piling streets. An old man, always fawn-bouldered, yellow-gloved, and at this time of year with spats of snow, would take his constitutional to the waves until nothing of them would take his constitutional to the white Bowling Green and back, as he would take it wet or fine on Christmas Day or Doomsday. Sometimes 2 hale young men with pipes blazing, no overcoats and wind-blown scarves, would trudge unspeaking down to the forlorn sea, to work up an appetite, to blow away the fumes, who knows, to walk into the waves until nothing of them was left but the 2 curling smoke clouds of their inextinguishable briars. Then I would be slap-dashing home, the gravy smell of the dinner of others, the bird smell, the brandy, the pudding, the mince coiling up to my nostrils, when out of a snow-clogged side lane would come a boy the spit of myself, with a pink-tipped cigarette and a violent past of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, leering all to himself. I hated him on sight and sound, and would be about to put my dog whistle to my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas, when suddenly he, with a violent wink, put his whistle to his lips and blew so stridently, so high, so exquisitely loud, that gobbling faces, their cheeks bulged with goose, would press against their tinseled windows the whole length of the white echoing street. For dinner we had turkey and blazing pudding, and after dinner the uncles sat in front of the fire, loosened all their buttons, put their large moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little and slept. Mothers and aunts and sisters scuttled to and fro bearing tureens. Aunt Bessie, who had already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered at the sideboard and had some elderberry wine. The dog was sick. Auntie Dosey had to have 3 aspirins. But Auntie Hannah, who liked port, stood in the middle of the snow-bound backyard singing like a big-bosomed thrush. I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up to, and then when they burst, which they all did, the uncles jumped and rumbled. In the rich and heavy afternoon, the uncles breathing like dolphins and the snow descending, I would sit among festoons and Chinese lanterns and nibble dates, and try to make a model man-of-war following the instructions for little engineers, and produce what might be mistaken for a sea-going tram car. Or I would go out, my bright new boots squeaking into the white world, onto the seaward hill, to call on Jim and Dan and Jack, and to pad through the still streets, leaving huge deep footprints on the hidden pavements. I'll bet people will think there's been hippos. What would you do if you saw a hippo coming down the street? I'd go like this, bang, I'd throw him over the railings and roll him down the hill, and then I'd tickle him under the ear and he'd wag his tail. What would you do if you saw 2 hippos? Iron-flanked and bellowing, he-hippos clanked and battered through the scudding snow toward us as we passed Mr. Daniels' house. Let's write things in the snow. Let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball through his letterbox. Let's write Mr. Daniel looks like a spaniel all over his lawn. Or we walked on the white shore. Can the fishes see it snowing? The silent, one-clouded heavens drifted onto the sea. Now we were snow-blind travelers lost on the north hills, and vast dewlap dogs with flasks around their necks ambled and shambled up to us baying Excelsior. We returned home through the poor streets, where only a few children fumbled with bare red fingers in the wheel-rutted snow and cat-called after us, their voices fading away as we trudged uphill into the cries of dock-birds and the hooting ships out in the whirling bay. And then at tea, the recovered uncles would be jolly, and the ice cake loomed in the center of the table like a marble grave. Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum because it was only once a year. Bring out the tall tales now that we told by the fire as the gaslight bubbled like a diaper. Ghosts hooed like owls in the long nights when I dared not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubby hole under the stairs where the gas meter ticked. And I remember that we went singing carols once when there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house, and we stumbled up the darkness of the drive that night, each one of us afraid, each one holding a stone in his hand just in case, and all of us too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old and unpleasant and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves. We reached the black bulk of the house. What shall we give them? Hark the herald? No, Jack said. Good King Wenceslas. I'll count 3. 1, 2, 3. And we began to sing. Our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness round the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, and in a small, dry voice, like the voice of someone who has not spoken for a long time, joined her singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice from the other side of the door. A small, dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside our house. The front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle gulping gas. Everything was good again and shone over the town. Perhaps it was a ghost, Jim said. Perhaps it was trolls, Dan said, who was always reading. Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left, Jack said. And we did that. Always on Christmas night there was music. An uncle played the fiddle, a cousin sang Cherry Ripe, and another sang Drake's Drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who had got on to the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death, and then another in which she said her heart was like a bird's nest, and then everyone laughed again, and then I went to bed. Looking through my bedroom window, out into the moonlight and the unending smoke-colored snow, I could see the lights in the windows of all the other houses on our hill, and hear the music rising from them of the long, steadily falling night. I turned the gas down. I got into bed. I said some words to the close and holy darkness, and then I slept. Per se. So I went back through and picked out some of the lighter poems. A lot of these are old, but I thought I'd read a few lighter poems, light for me at least. I say a lot of these are from before, probably about 2002, when the world started darkening a bit. This is for Anne, June 4th, 1999. I have been thinking lately about who I am. I mean not that little man who I often imagine lives somewhere upstairs, feverishly working the wheels and levers of my brain, watching the movie, keeping track, or not, of sight and sound and touch and smell. Not the genie in the bottle of my brain, but my brain itself. The thing I know is, after all, both bottle and genie. As near as I can understand it, what I am is not so much the parts, neurons and chemical transmitters, as the linkings made and remade and rearranged, a mutable network of interconnections that somehow constitute who it is who wakes up this bud-burst green spring morning with you beside me. Connections remade frequently enough form pathways. Receptors stimulated very many times by the same axons are more easily stimulated in the future. So patterns are formed, become linked. The map grows deeper and more complex. For more than half my life, I have been weaving you into this net. What happens when I stand up, cross a room, open a door, or when I simply breathe this morning air is neither more nor less than the singing of these evolving and intertwining structures. The touch of your hand on my shoulder then, my perception of it, resonates deeply in this unfathomable complexity. Which synapses are you, and which are me? Love, the truth is, there is no one watching the movie. The genie is out of the bottle. There is no way to tease apart the strands of these patterns. No conceivable way that I can ever again be a me without being an us.
Bravo.
This is a poem. I normally type out poems in large print so that I can read them easily. This is a poem I didn't really plan to read tonight, but I need to because the person it was actually written for is here tonight. Heart of Oak, for Michael, who built a tree house. how his mind moved itself into the tree. Wood fastened to wood, uncovering the helix at the oak heart, so that body becomes tree on climbing, fitting itself into the ancient arboreal memory of growth. It is enough sometimes simply to unfold like this, pouring self back into the world. Watching the astronauts, International Space Station, March 2001. Is this what the body dreams for itself? To float like Chagall's lover, propelled by whim or intention to any curvature of space? Here on Earth where weight defines us, and things stay where they are put, rock-solid, sure-footed feet on the ground, we watch wrapped the erratic path of a wind-drift plastic bag above a gusty city street. Or falling asleep, we learn again to fly. Between the pre-birth amniotic lilt and the final matterless floating away, we learn to praise and curse the time-bound present with its awful weight of being. Dreaming always of height and distance, we build pyramids, obelisks, steeples, loft kites, balloons, airplanes, and now, built on the broken bones of centuries, this improbable assembly of space-borne tin cans in which a chosen few are permitted, for a time at least, to defy all laws and float free with their astonished bodies. Paying attention. Striking the teaspoon in the empty cereal bowl, the tap water glances off, arcs gracefully, and lands, of course, on my clean shirt. How many times have I done this? In my mind, the water hangs suspended, a silver amoeboid globule. Do I flinch before it hits me? Before it hits the spoon? Maybe even before I turn on the tap or put the bowl in the sink? Surely a structure linking act with outcome must reside somewhere in my brain. I imagine the homunculus of that thought shaking its head even as I eat, saying, "Oh, now, here it comes again. Watch, look what we will do." Maybe it even tries to warn, hey, remember, spoon, bowl, flying water, you, don't, dimwit. But whatever voice that synaptic construct may have is lost in the crackling neural firestorm, checking the clock, calculating the day's weather, indulging imaginary conversations, listening always to the verbal static of self. Maybe the homunculus has learned the futility of shouting into that weather. Maybe it just sits and waits. Or maybe it's smart enough to call ahead to memory, requesting the location of a new, clean shirt. No matter. I'll know soon enough, in the inevitable instant, all noise is stunned silent by the cold, wet slap smack in the middle of Monday. Is it still day on the other side of the mirror? The shoes were called spectators. What she wore, a suit, navy? No, a light tan perhaps to go with the shoes. It was the train then, to San Francisco. The first time you saw that strange light after the rain. No, it was not like that at all. Brown and white shoes, Sunday, the sea green sky. Write when you can. The lady wearing weeds appears at the gate demanding yesterday, but the houses are already on fire. It is impossible to counter the pull of the moon. If you were married to her, he thinks, time would last forever. Cold snap. Beyond the fence line, ice holds words in check. Nothing breaks this sky. Coins freeze on the tongue. Birds have long since abandoned the rafters. If there was a way into the cave, it is lost now. Someone has hung a pair of gloves on a clothesline. Their gestures pretend a way out of the story. But the iron bell remains silent, its clapper frozen to the rim of the known world. Or else, what she saw was not exactly what we meant. That distinction of choice was lost when we lost, when? All our marbles. Consider this statement, Exhibit A. Moonshot. Incandescent. Semaphore. Diligent dichotomy. Expectations excited by every wave of the troposphere. Talked himself into a corner and had to escape by vaulting over the bounds of reason. Cross-purpose allegory or simple bold-faced lie? Same price for all prevarications. Everything overstated. Nothing understood. We have not seen the cow for days.
Understood.
Journey to the north. If this is what we thought all along, then what color did we imagine for our dreams? You don't have to answer. I just like these convoluted conjectures, named for this day already lost in the shuffle. You might wonder how long we can go on like this. For years I've been leaving small bits of my brain like breadcrumbs to mark the way back. I was fascinated a couple of years ago watching the pre-climb of the Don Wall of El Capitan. This is titled Don Wall, El Capitan, January 2015. Impossible, you might have said. I was already off the grid, stunned among vertical stone. Night after night of this, climbing the big walls in my sleep, while your breath close in my ear became the color of weather. In the mornings, rescued again to your warm cocoon, I could still smell rock as I massaged my aching fingers. Little literary wordplay. The cat crosses the ice on quick feet. Oblivious of Sandberg or Williams, it hurries across the small cove, then stops, angles off to the left, searching for dry landfall, sniffs air, and darts finally into the brush, leaving no mark on landscape or literature.
No.
I think I may have read this here before, but too bad. One of the things I decided about the Christmas season is at least it's an opportunity to swap earworms. And this is titled Earworm. What might kill these synaptic demons? Thrown tantrums and long-held breaths have no effect against persistent oral wallpaper. All speech and music rides the waves of these rhythms that cannot be beaten from the brain. Say you love me, say you hate me and want to throw me down the stairs, say my hair is on fire, all of it still plays against the same refrain. Blue moon, don't worry about me, do you recall a cottage small upon a hill? It must have been moonglow. I'm thinking maybe a shotgun would be loud enough to do the trick. Don't worry about me. And this is the last poem I'll read, and this actually is a new poem. Water fills the bathroom sink. emitting a curl of steam in the chill morning. You are living your life. This is what is, not that other thing you dreamed of. In a minute, you will shut off the tap with a smooth pressure on the handle, and then plunge your hands into the soothing warmth with a shudder of pure joy.